When I was a little girl, I read the Sailor Moon manga. The anime was on TV, but I didn't have cable, so it wasn't as accessible to me as these little black and white books I could get at my local Barnes & Noble. My favorite arc was the Super S arc, which begins with Chibimoon getting turned into an adult, and Sailor Moon getting turned into a child by the dark magic of the Dead Moon Circus. At the end of the arc, the antagonists, the Amazons Quartet, are revealed to be Chibimoon's sailor team from the future, in which she takes on the role of main Sailor Senshi in Sailor Moon's place. I always adored that idea. Chibimoon in her future as the leader of the Scouts, because while it was hinted at in these chapters, we never got to see what it was really like. That left the door open for my imagination to run wild, and fill in the blanks myself with the stories that I'd act out with my dolls. Of course, the Chibimoon I had was 8 inches tall, and very obviously meant to be a child character. But I used to go on this website called bobagirl.com that had pictures of all of the Sailor Moon dolls from around the world. That's when I found out that in Italy, a toy company called Giochi Preizosi made a version of Super Chibimoon that was 11.5 inches tall, just like the rest of the Sailor Scouts. I got so excited. I found the doll on eBay for $20 and actually convinced my mom to order it for me, which I was almost never successful at. Online shopping in those days was new, and it was a lot of hassle that people in my family just weren't used to and didn't like. I waited for it, but there was some kind of issue, and getting my mom to answer eBay messages from some seller that didn't speak English was just not going to happen, so the doll never arrived. Now I should mention that there were 2 versions of the Super Chibimoon doll made by Giochi Preizosi that met my height requirement. There's a version with a normal Giochi Preizosi body, and a talking version with a speaker in her torso who says 4 phrases in Italian. They both wear the exact same outfit and look almost exactly the same, just one talks and the other doesn't. The one that I wanted was the talking version, because she's just a few centimeters taller than the other one, and has a slightly prettier face mold in my opinion. But fast forward 15 years, and neither version of this doll is anywhere to be found. I searched Giochi Preizosi for months with no Chibimoon results. Then suddenly, out of the blue, one day I got a single search result from eBay Italy. It was the non-talking version, and she was missing her choker, tiara, underwear, and 1 boot, and was in pretty raggedy shape. But I had decided months before that if I ever found her, no matter what price, I would get her. So when she showed up, I made my offer, and about a month later, she arrived in the mail from Italy. Grazie mille. One of the reasons I was willing to buy this expensive doll with only 1 boot is because 10 years ago, when I was first restoring my other Sailor Moon dolls, I found an inexpensive fashion pack for the Italian Sailor Moon dolls that I was hoping I could source parts from for my Irwin girls if the need arose. Obviously they ended up being incompatible, but I always held on to it, year after year, move after move, kind of secretly hoping that one day I might have a Giochi Preizosi doll of my own to put it on. Well, its moment had finally come. It had every single piece this doll was missing, except the choker, and the boots were the wrong color, but I was sure I could paint them to match. I also sourced a pair of undies from one of the Irwin donor dolls I had amassed. I had everything I needed right here, I thought. Getting a good look at her right out of the parcel, she had obviously had a long, eventful life. Her dress was visibly dirty, with the skirt a shade or 2 darker than the rest of the outfit. Her tiara was missing, and her earrings had faded from gold to silver. Her hair was extremely crunchy feeling, and I was dreading trying to fix it because of how things went with Sailor Moon last time, but it was still in what looked like the factory style from the photos of the doll in the box I had seen. Her gloves were replacements. Someone had actually already sewn her new gloves to replace the ones she came with. Then, of course, there was the boot situation. I've never painted on doll shoes before, so I really didn't know if it would end up working out or if the paint would end up flaking right off, but I was determined to try. She did at least come with her original hair bobbles, but they were pretty different from the Irwin kind I was used to. This gal was going to be a lot of work, so I went ahead and got started. First things first, rather than try to wash her with those gaping holes in her head, I went ahead and had my husband carefully open the blister for the spare outfit with his pocket knife. The reason that it was so cheap originally is the blister had a nice big crack down the front already, so I didn't feel too terrible about freeing the contents. The packaging is really pretty though, so I wanted to try to keep it nice as a memento. With the tiara free, I popped it into her head, and then I tried on the flashy gold gloves, since I thought that they might look nice with the gold details on her outfit. The boots were held into the packing with tape, so they were a little sticky coming out, and the first thing I did was give them a good scrub with baking soda and dish soap to prep them for painting. Then I got the doll herself ready to be washed by removing the outfit and hair ties. She has a funny twist and turn waist that's cut at a diagonal angle. I haven't seen that on a doll before. In terms of washing her outfit, I was very worried that the bright pink dyes from the bows and trim would bleed onto the white dress. So taking a little bit of white vinegar on a Q-tip, I spot tested an area from the back of her dress to see if it would bleed. To my surprise, it didn't at all. Just in case, I cut some slits in some color catchers and slipped them on under the bows to prevent the two from touching in the wash. And then I mixed some whitening OxyClean in a small bowl, following the directions on the container, and let the dress soak for 6 hours. I'm not kidding, it says to let stains soak for that long, so I did. Meanwhile, it was time to wash the 3 decades of grime off of our new bambola. Following the usual method, I washed her thoroughly with dish soap and baking soda, really making sure I got any dust off that might be trying to hide out under her chin or around her ears. I decided not to worry about trying to maintain her part or styling because, to be honest, I don't love the way that they styled these dolls in the factory, and I had something else in mind I was going to try for her. So I set about washing her hair with laundry detergent the same way I always do. But this time I was gearing up to try something new. On my video about poor Sailor Moon's ruined hair, I got a comment from someone who suggested I use a wire pet brush to detangle nylon hair. Then I realized this random comment had actually come from an amazing doll customizer I follow on Instagram, Dolljunk, and he seems to really know his stuff. So I lay her out on a towel and tried with fabric softener to detangle her hair with a wire pet brush. That wasn't working so well. So I finally broke down and just tried human hair conditioner like Dolljunk had suggested. I try to avoid using this on dolls because the way conditioner works is it deposits oil in your hair, and synthetic hair probably doesn't need oil sitting around in it. But this was what was suggested, and I trust the experience of someone who obviously knows more than me. Unsurprisingly, it worked way better than the fabric softener, so from now on I will be less stubborn and use it more liberally in restorations, at least for gals that have really bad frizz. I had gotten this brush for my long-haired cat years ago, only to find out that you're not actually supposed to use this kind of brush on a long-haired cat. So it was barely used, and I thoroughly cleaned and sanitized it before using it here. After the bulk of the detangling was done with this brush, I switched to the usual comb and made sure I could glide it through with the wide-toothed side and then the small-toothed side, and then I rinsed out the conditioner. Though her hair was definitely less tangly, the ends were still looking very frizzy. So I prepped her for a boil wash by combing some more fabric softener into the hair. I also wanted to try curling her bangs with pipe cleaners, since I had also seen Dolljunk do this on their customs, but I couldn't get it quite right here. So for now, you can ignore the pipe cleaner. I'll show you the time I actually did it correctly. At any rate, I did the usual boil. 2 dunks in boiled water for 60 seconds each, combing down through the hair in between. Then I poured the remaining water from the kettle down onto her head, combed it out again, and set it with cold water from the tap. I started her drying outside, but there was very obviously no improvement to the texture of her hair after just one boil. Someone else in the comments of the Sailor Moon video had suggested a video by DerpyDerp910 on how to defrizz nylon My Little Pony hair. I had obviously tried flat ironing ruined nylon hair before with only marginally improved results, but this method looked like it might solve the problem of the ends still feeling so crunchy, so I gave it a shot. Using hand lotion as a heat protectant, I re-wet the hair and worked the lotion into each section. I happen to have the exact same curling iron that DerpyDerp had used in their video, so I followed their recommendation and set the heat to level 10. By the way, their video is linked in the description below if you need more detailed information about what steps I was following. I carefully worked the iron over each strand until it was smooth. Then I combed the ends out and concentrated on running the iron over them over and over, combing in between until I could run my fingers over it and feel no bumps or resistance. The last step for each strand was actually wrapping it in the iron and holding it for a few seconds to create a curl. Do not try this at high heat, and make sure you find a low heat setting on your own iron that works for doll hair if you're going to try this on your own doll. As I went, I also trimmed the frizziest bits of the ends off, and kept the completed strands held to one side in a clip so that I could work my way through the whole head. Now this doll has the most hair for a fashion doll I have ever seen. She's extremely densely rooted, and has so much volume, so this process took a whopping 9 hours, and I constantly needed to keep applying more water and lotion to make sure that the hair stayed protected from the heat. But I could tell as I went through that it was actually working. Her texture was very much improved. Not quite good as new, but good enough to style and much softer and smoother feeling. I'm not gonna lie, it still probably would have been less backbreaking effort to reroot her. But you know what, for a vintage doll that's this hard to find, keeping so much of her original hair is worth it to me. When she was done, the only part of her head I didn't touch with heat was her bangs, so I trimmed some of the frizzy ends off. She had so much lotion in her hair that when I went to wash it out with detergent, it didn't budge. so the next day I ended up having to rewash it and use human shampoo to strip out all that oil that had built up out of her hair. Her body doesn't pop apart like the Irwins do, so I wrapped her up to keep her from getting water inside her joints and needing to sit outside to dry again. By the way, I almost forgot to mention this, but when her outfit was done soaking, I rinsed it out and let it air dry, and it came out looking almost as good as new. Billy Mays did not steer me wrong. Also, I forgot to mention this, but at some point I swapped her earrings with the ones from the blister pack too, so that they would be shiny and new looking again to match the tiara. Of course, through this miracle hair treatment, her factory parting had completely disappeared. If you remember from the Sailor Moon video when I had to try to style Princess Serenity's hair, she was bald in some places on her head, and required a process I now know is called thatching to lace the 2 rows of hair down the back of her head and cover all the areas where there isn't enough hair. This doll had a lot of hair, so rethatching her part took a long time, but it was actually a much easier process since I've kind of worked out a method of doing it that requires less guesswork. Basically, I comb away all the other hair until I see just the 2 rows of hair that make up her part, and I secure the rest out of the way with a hairband. Then I use a styling comb with a pick to carefully separate the little plugs of hair and lace them one over the other all the way down the back of the head, pressing the completed rows out of the way with my hands as I go. It's slightly more organized than the last time I did it, and it makes the process a lot more relaxing and simple. The only problem this time was just the sheer amount of hair made it take a really long time, and on top of that, this doll was rooted incorrectly, and the rows that make up her part go diagonally down the back of her head. I followed them anyway, but it's pretty funny that she just originally came from the factory with an extremely crooked part. When her parting was done, I secured the 2 sections of hair with rubber bands to make sure that they stayed just the way I arranged them. This is where I go to actually correctly curl her bangs with pipe cleaners. So I had heard of this method of curling doll hair like 10 years ago, but I think I disregarded it at the time simply because I did not have pipe cleaners on hand, and then that stuck in my brain as there was a reason I didn't want to do that, so I never actually attempted it. But I think after trying them this time, these are hands down the most efficient way to curl doll hair and give the neatest results. So what you do is you take a small bit of pipe cleaner and create a loop at one end by twisting it. Then you slide one side of the pipe cleaner under the hair you want to curl and the other one over the top. You twist the loose ends together so that it creates a secure grip on the hair. Once it's tight, pull it down to the ends of the hair, then curl it up in whichever direction you want the curl to go. Now that it's in place, secure it by bending the 2 ends over each other. To do her bangs, I did 2 small pipe cleaners, one on each side in order to create a parting down the middle to show her tiara. Not that I really needed to since her forehead is so massive, but yeah, this was the look I was going for. To keep it neat and smooth, I used a previously unused mascara wand to comb the bangs down as I went. With her body wrapped up nice and tight to keep it dry, I went to boil some water. The hot water will set the curl in place and her thatching, so that it will stay where I want it. First, I poured the hot water directly on her head to make sure that I got all her thatching nice and saturated with hot water in the direction I wanted it to go. Of course, this dousing caused the rubber bands to break. Then I poured a mug of hot water and left her head sitting in it for a few minutes. Doll Junk on his Tumblr, which I'll link below, recommends leaving it in the mug until it cools all the way down, but her head was getting very soft, and since I don't know how it's attached to the neck, I really didn't want it to accidentally come off in some unintended way. So I took her back out, combed her hair out, set it with cold water, and re-secured it into the pigtails with elastics. Since I was planning on attempting a somewhat elaborate hairstyle, I didn't give it any time to dry, and just decided to style it wet. I used these pink elastics this time I got from the craft store to try to match what was used in her original factory styling. First, I should mention that her hair actually has 2 different layers in length. One somewhat short layer that starts at the front of her head near her bangs and stops about 1/4 of the way back, and one full-length layer that encompasses the rest of her hair. These shorter layers are what made up the twists that created her buns originally. I didn't really love that look, and also I couldn't recreate it at all when I tried, so I decided to go for something different. To keep the 2 layers separate, I secured the first one into pigtails with elastic, and then the second layer was added to the pigtails using another elastic, creating 1 elastic layer of separation between them. Then I split the short layer in 2 and braided one into a tiny braid, folded the braid over, and secured that to the pigtail with a 3rd elastic. Finally, I used the remaining short section of hair and wrapped it around the folded braid to create the bun, securing that with the final 4th elastic. It is, admittedly, a lot of elastic, but it is less noticeable in person than it is in pictures and on video, and for someone who's extremely inexperienced styling doll hair into carrot-shaped buns, I think this isn't bad for a first attempt. The next day, it was time to remove the bangs from our pipe cleaner curlers, And I guess maybe they're like way curlier than I meant them to be, but whatever. I've already spent 12 hours on this hair, I'm fine with it. Her hair was really broken off short in some places from where it was originally secured with elastics for 30 years, so to tame the flyaways, I followed Doll Reddit's kind advice and mixed hair gel with water and then glued down all the messy little hairs with a toothbrush. Then I trimmed and plucked away any remaining little hairs that just didn't fit anywhere else. You may have noticed that for most of this video, I've been putting her in this dress from the fashion pack. Well, I was just really happy to finally have it out of that blister and to have a doll to put it on. So I tried the rest of the outfit on her and really loved how it looked. Honestly, it made me a bit emotional to have this doll finally standing here in front of me, looking so polished and wearing the outfit that I had saved for her for all those years. But it was time to ruin it by painting those boots. I rigged a stand for them by taping some long Q-tips to a tissue box and setting each boot on the ends. I had my husband's help for this part because filming and painting at the same time is really difficult when you have an ancient camera that refuses to autofocus. So to start with, we sprayed the boots with a matte clear coat to prime them for paint, and then following the instructions on the can, let that dry for several hours before applying paint. Then we mixed our first coat of acrylic paint. He applied it, and we let it dry for another hour. We repeated this step several times until we finally could see no more red through the paint. Then we touched up the yellow and white parts of the boot with a few layers of their own paint, letting dry in between. Of course, the paint came out a little streaky, so to smooth it out we used 1200 grit sandpaper to carefully buff out any lumps and unevenness. Remember, if you're going to sand acrylic paint, always wear protective gear, as acrylic dust is extremely toxic. Then, with one more coat of each color for good measure, we gave it a good few hours to dry before finally sealing it with more matte clear coat. And then, I couldn't believe it, but just as I was sure I was finishing up my Chibimoon project, the talking version showed up on eBay and one of my lovely followers brought it to my attention, knowing I was looking for it. I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I was like, but I just put so much work into the other one, and do I really want to spend another 12 hours doing her hair again if it turns out to be in bad shape? And then I bought it. This one came with both her boots, an outfit, her original tiara, original gloves, pretty much everything but the choker and some underwear. Her outfit was for the most part in better shape than the other one, the shoulder decorations were less ragged, and although her outfit was fraying a little at the bottom, it was cleaner than the other one, it wouldn't need soaking in OxyClean. And she talks. She came with some batteries already in her, and she still works! I mean, kind of. You have to lean her forward where the batteries don't make full contact with the insides, but she does talk. Her hair, thank God, was in much better shape overall. Still a little frizzy, but I was pretty sure it wouldn't need ironing since it didn't feel crunchy the same way. And wouldn't you know it, her waist was also a diagonal twist and turn, which meant that there wasn't anything wrong with the other one, and it was just like that. But this one's parting was straight down the back of her head rather than diagonal, so that definitely was a mistake. At the very least, the underwear wouldn't be hard to replace, as my friend Double-Edged Cat had just sent me a ton of spare Irwin doll clothes, including 2 sets of underwear. Things were looking up. And then, much to my dismay, when the boots that we were painting dried from the sealant, they suddenly had big black cracks down the middle. I had no idea what I did wrong, because when I googled why this happened, all the results said things like, maybe your sealant was defective or you didn't let it dry enough first. But we had given it a lot of time to dry, and it seemed weird that the sealant that I had used on other previous projects suddenly wasn't working. I got frustrated, so I left it for a week or two, and then I noticed they were sticky. They suddenly were extremely sticky, and when they touched, paint transferred from one to the other. I also had tried them back on the doll's feet to see if the paint would crack, and when I removed them, her legs were stained. I figured I had just fucked it up and I needed to start over with hobby paints or something. So after finding a video from Retro Geek Crafts about how to remove acrylic paint from vinyl with warm water, I got to work for a few hours scrubbing it all off of them. It took a lot of elbow grease and a lot of work, but eventually it came off. But even after removing all of the paint, and even after scrubbing them with baking soda and dish soap again and letting them totally dry, they were still sticky. Something was definitely wrong. It turns out, because I had held onto these boots in their original packaging, even though the blister was cracked, they weren't receiving regular airflow and plasticizer had started leaching out of them. That was why they were sticky when I removed them from the package. It wasn't the tape. They were just really old boots and had started deteriorating from age. I had heard of things like pony cancer or sad doll disease, both of which came along with claims that the deterioration can spread from toy to toy is stored together. So just to make sure, I consulted the wealth of knowledge on doll Reddit yet again to separate fact from fiction, and distinguish what was actually happening here versus the other ways dolls can deteriorate over time. What I figured out was, it's not likely to actually spread to any of the rest of my dolls, and I can keep washing it over and over until all the plasticizer has leached all the way out of them, and eventually they would turn hard and shrink a little and stop being sticky. But the staining would remain a problem, and sticky isn't really the aesthetic I was going for. So I gave up, went over to eBay, and dropped another chunk of cash on a fully clothed Sailor Moon Bandai Japan doll. I figured this would be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. I get a choker for Talking Chibiusa, some boots for this one, and a Bandai doll to show in an upcoming video I have planned about all the different types of Sailor Moon dolls released. In the meantime, I got to work on cleaning up the new Talking Chibimoon. I removed her outfit and batteries, boiled her boots to remove them, and wiped her down carefully with baby wipes first. This gal was part android, so submerging her in water was not an option, and I had to be really careful about using any near her machinery. So, a surface wipe was all she was gonna get, coupled with a quick scrub from a magic eraser, and then I masked off her torso with tape and cling wrap and wrapped her in a towel to keep her from getting wet inside during her salon treatment. I also left her hair in elastics to keep her part intact, so that I could avoid another several hours of rethatching. This time I filled the sink with a few inches of water, since I thought that would be easier to control versus running water from the tap. I dipped her head carefully in it, rathered it with People shampoo this time, just skipping the laundry products entirely, and then I rinsed her as if she was being baptized. Then I went straight to the towel with a pet brush and human conditioner, working it through her pigtails until they were tangle-free. I think honestly I kind of rushed through this a bit, but A, I was worried about her speaker and protecting it from getting damaged, and B, can you honestly blame me after how much work this all has been already? Once again, I carefully rinsed the conditioner out of her hair without running the water, and then I set her to the side and got the kettle boiling. I gave her the traditional 2 dunks in the boil, combing down through the pigtails in between, and then I set her bangs in the pipe cleaner curlers and just got this step out of the way at the same time, letting her bangs sit in the hot water for around 3 minutes with breaks in between. Then I set the style with cold water and some diluted hair gel, which I guess I never actually did on the other Chibimoon now that I think about it, and this time I did actually run her hair under the tap carefully just to make sure she was rinsed pretty well with clean water. This time, instead of treating the frizzy bits of her hair with extra heat, I just trimmed them off since they were all at the very ends. Right away I got to work styling her hair, since it's the easiest to do when it's wet, and re-wetting her once she was out of her cocoon was not an option. At first, I considered doing it a different way than the way I did the other one, but eventually I just settled on doing the exact same hairstyle, only this time just using clear bands since they were thinner and less bulky, and I forgot to get out the pink ones anyway. It didn't turn out completely identical to the first attempt, but in some ways it was actually better, since the buns were straighter and ended up closer to the head because the pigtails themselves were higher. When the style was finished, I brushed some diluted hair gel in again with a toothbrush to glue down the short bits and flyaways. Now it was time to mend her dress, and upon further inspection, someone had actually already done repairs to this one. There was a new thread on the inside to hold the trim to the hem of the skirt. I guess someone had tried to repair this before. I turned the garment inside out and had my husband help me paint in some fray check, just cause sometimes I like having his help, and he's sweet and always happy to be involved. So after that dried, I trimmed off the long frayed ends. I kind of get the feeling that this fray check is not going to be a long-term solution, and if I move her around a lot, I may need to try something else, or have her wear the other Super Chibimoon dress instead. But for now, this did the trick. Then I tried to reattach the hair bobbles, which was a bit tricky since this yellow cord is kind of elasticy but not really, and also it was tied in such a way that it had long ends sticking out in the back. But I got it to lay down in a way that you can't really see them from the front at least, so there's that. At this point, I now had 2 semi-identical dolls. I really did love that fashion pack outfit too, so I decided to give up on painting the boots, and when the new ones arrived on the Bandai doll, I left them as is, a pinkish red. Thankfully, the shape is identical to the Giochi Preizosi ones. To my shock and horror, the Bandai Japan chokers apparently aren't at all like the Bandai Asia chokers, and they're just a solid ring you have to remove the entire head to get on and off. So I boiled the new gal's head, popped it off, removed the choker, and my husband carefully cut a slit through the back so that I could just slip it on over the Giochi doll's neck. It's probably for the better anyway, since the Bandai dolls have smaller necks, and it probably wouldn't have fit without a gap in the back. The last, final step was putting the baubles back on in the first Chibiusa's hair. At this point, it's been 4 months since I originally styled it, and I noticed that her pink hair elastics were already turning white and disintegrating. Very cool! The cords on her hair bobbles weren't elasticy even a little bit, so I had no idea how I was going to get them on. I slid them over the pigtails, and then since I couldn't tie them, I just gave up and secured them with even more elastics. Clear ones this time, since the pink ones were coming apart anyway. It looks like garbage from the back, but you know what? Her part is crooked in the back anyway, so just don't look at her from the back, okay? Okay. At some point, I will probably need to redo her hair entirely and remove the pink crumbling elastics from it, but not today. I'll save it for sometime when I feel like spending time with my dolls again. So now, the finishing touches are simply to polish away some of the scuffs on these Bandai boots with a magic eraser, and re-gel her hair now that I've messed it up with the bobbles and the retying. And they are finally both complete. These are dolls I didn't grow up with, but I always dreamed about ever since I was a little girl, and it fills my heart to see them here with me looking so polished and pretty. Even though this process was long, and was hard work that was often murder on my back, and there were some disappointments, some ups and downs along the way, I feel like I really got to enjoy them both even after all these years. I got to take these two dolls, who've existed in the world for 30 years, who've lived in at least 2 different continents, spent time in who knows how many different households, probably have had adventures with their original owners, who were lovingly repaired by someone else along the way, who fixed the trim on their skirt and sewed new gloves for them, and I got to add my own little piece of myself to their story. They've had such long lives, and they definitely don't look factory brand new or anything, but Hart from my Discord said something very sweet the other night when we were talking about it. That sometimes our things will age, sometimes they'll leak plasticizer, sometimes they'll be damaged in ways that can't be reversed. But they're still here, we're still together, aging side by side. As they gain wear and tear, so do I, and neither of us are going through that alone. As someone who frets over maintaining the things that have been so important to my survival throughout my life, that was a very comforting thought, so I thought I would share it with you. Nothing lasts forever, but our lives are so much richer for the time we got to enjoy together. And that's really what this process is about.